I smoothed out 3 mechanical tells without touching any fact, figure, date, institution, or disclaimer, traded a few stactum dashes for commas and rephrasing they'd started to feel like a tick, loosened 2 sentences that read as a checklist rather than speech. Regular physical activity tops the list. Managing cardiovascular risk factors matters. Now opens with start with. Cardiovascular risk factors matter. For more natural variety. And cut a couple of throat-clearing transitions. Given all this, that's an important pause point that sounded more like a narrator announcing structure than someone talking to you. For years, doctors have told us to watch for one thing above all else when it comes to Alzheimer's: memory loss, forgotten names, missed appointments. That's the sign everyone's trained to look for. But what if the real first sign has nothing to do with memory at all? And it's something most of us experience every single week without giving it a second thought. New research out of Texas A&M Health, paired with a striking 2026 study from Mayo Clinic, suggests the disease may quietly announce itself years before memory ever becomes a problem, through something far more ordinary and far easier to miss. If you're over 50, or you're watching a parent get a little older, this isn't just interesting science. It could change how early you or someone you love is able to act. So, what is it exactly? Let's start with someone it might already be happening to. Think about a woman named Carol, not a real patient, just an example of how this tends to look in everyday life. Carol is sharp. She still does the crossword every morning, remembers her grandchildren's birthdays, and can tell you what she had for lunch 3 days ago. But her daughter has noticed something small. When their usual coffee shop closed and they had to pick a new one, Carol seemed unsettled for days. When a family dinner got moved from Sunday to Saturday, she brought it up 4 separate times. Not because she forgot, but because she simply couldn't settle into the change. Nothing about Carol's memory looks unusual. Her ability to adjust, though, does. Or take Frank, a retired engineer who prided himself on being the guy who could fix anything. When his bank switched to a new online system last year, it wasn't that Frank forgot his password or couldn't find the login page. He remembered all of that fine. It was that he couldn't let go of how the old system worked, insisting for weeks the new layout was wrong, even after his son walked him through it 3 times. Frank's memory was intact. What had quietly gotten harder was simply meeting a new situation on its own terms. That's the exact pattern researchers at Texas A&M Health have been studying, and their question wasn't about memory at all. It was about flexibility, specifically whether the brain's ability to smoothly adjust when circumstances change might be one of the very first things affected by Alzheimer's disease, showing up years before memory problems ever appear. Scientists call this cognitive flexibility, but the idea is simple. Picture a driver who has to change lanes on the highway. Most of the time you're cruising on autopilot, following the routine you know. Cognitive flexibility is the shoulder check and merge moment when something changes and your brain has to update the plan in real time instead of sticking to the old one. It's a different job than memory, which stores and recalls what already happened. Flexibility handles what's happening right now, especially when it doesn't match what you expected. To understand why that distinction matters, it helps to picture what's actually happening inside the brain long before anyone notices a problem. Alzheimer's doesn't begin the day someone forgets a name. It begins quietly, sometimes decades earlier, as certain proteins slowly build up and brain cells gradually lose their ability to communicate with each other. A 2026 Mayo Clinic study mapped part of this timeline clearly for the first time. Researchers found Alzheimer's-related changes tend to unfold in 2 separate windows long before diagnosis. The first, often in a person's early 60s, involves amyloid plaques building up, clumps of protein that interfere with normal brain signaling. The second, arriving in the late 60s or early 70s, involves a different protein called tau plus early shrinkage in certain brain regions. Here's what the Texas A&M team added. Instead of only tracking memory in these earlier stages, they looked at adaptability and found that in animal models with Alzheimer's-related brain changes, adaptability broke down before anything resembling memory loss showed up. The merge lane skill seemed to falter before the storage skill did. Think about how the brain actually works, and that starts to make sense. Adapting to something new, a rerouted drive, a rearranged kitchen, a shifted weekly plan, asks more of the brain than simply recalling something familiar. It requires several brain regions to coordinate in real time, updating old assumptions on the fly. So if Alzheimer's-related changes are going to show up somewhere first, a demanding high coordination skill like this is exactly where researchers would expect to see it happen. You might wonder whether a doctor could simply test for adaptability the way they test for memory. Right now they can't, at least not directly. The tools doctors currently rely on, like the mini mental state exam or the Montreal Cognitive Assessment, were built around memory, language, and orientation, asking things like today's date, or having a person recall a short list of words minutes later. Adaptability isn't something these standard tests directly measure. A full evaluation typically also includes a detailed history from the person and their family, a medication review, blood work to rule out other causes like thyroid issues or vitamin deficiencies, and sometimes brain imaging. So while struggling with change is a genuinely interesting research finding, it is not on its own a diagnosis, and no single behavior pattern should be treated like one. Worth sitting with too. Struggling with change happens to everyone now and then, and on its own, it means nothing at all. Everyone has days where a schedule shift throws them off, especially during stress, poor sleep, or a long week. One difficult Tuesday doesn't predict anything about anyone's brain health. What researchers are describing is a pattern, not a single moment. An ongoing struggle with adapting that goes beyond normal daily friction and represents a real shift from how that person used to handle things. The way Frank's stubbornness was a genuine change from the man his family knew. The researchers are careful to note this work is still early too. Most of it comes from animal studies, and confirming whether the pattern reliably shows up in people years ahead of memory symptoms will require larger, longer human studies. Still, there's something hopeful buried in this finding. For years, the message around Alzheimer's has focused almost entirely on catching memory loss early. But by the time memory loss becomes noticeable, the disease has often already been developing quietly for a long time. If adaptability really does change earlier, that opens up a wider window, more time for awareness, more time for supportive lifestyle habits, and more time for an earlier, unhurried conversation with a doctor, well before the disease might otherwise have been suspected. So, what does this mean for you today? It doesn't mean diagnosing anyone from a single frustrating afternoon. It means paying attention to patterns over months, not moments. If a spouse, a parent, or you yourself seem to be having a harder and harder time adjusting when plans change or the unexpected happens, and it's a genuine shift from how that person used to be, that's worth mentioning to a doctor. Not out of alarm, but because earlier evaluation generally means more options on the table. There are everyday habits with real, evidence-based support for brain health too, and they're worth building into daily life regardless of any single symptom. Start with regular physical activity. Even a brisk daily walk is consistently linked to better cognitive outcomes over time. Cardiovascular risk factors matter just as much, since what's good for the heart tends to be good for the brain. So keeping blood pressure, blood sugar, and cholesterol in a healthy range with your doctor's guidance is one of the more solid, well-supported steps available. Don't overlook hearing health either. Studies link untreated hearing loss to higher cognitive decline risk, possibly because the brain works harder to fill in gaps. Staying socially engaged through conversation, community, and shared meals appears to support brain resilience. Even mentally challenging activities help, things like learning a new skill, a language, or an unfamiliar recipe, since they exercise the same flexible thinking this research is centered on. And quality sleep matters, since the brain does much of its maintenance work while you're asleep. None of these guarantee prevention, but research consistently suggests they support a brain better equipped to handle whatever changes come its way. If you or someone you love is genuinely struggling with change, adaptability, or planning in a way that feels different from before, the right next step isn't a search engine. It's a conversation with a doctor who can look at the whole picture using the fuller range of tools we just covered, rather than one symptom in isolation. Bring specific examples if you can. Small, real moments like Carol's coffee shop or Frank's standoff with a banking app are far more useful to a doctor than a vague sense that something feels off. Here's a question worth sitting with. When's the last time you noticed how you or someone you love handles a sudden change in plans? Not as a test and not as something to worry over. Just something worth paying the same quiet attention to as any other part of your health.